Alright, so I know this subreddit is full of people who've had some seriously fucked up shit happen to them. Like, I woke up with no legs, or my dead grandma showed me her new recipe for meatloaf. But holy fuck, what happened to me last night? I've never been so scared in my life. And honestly, I'm still not sure if it was real or if I just lost my damn mind. Let me back up a bit and set the scene because, trust me, you need context to understand how this all went down. It started off completely normal, or as normal as things can be when you live out in the middle of nowhere like I do. So picture this: small town, population 200 on a good day, surrounded by dense forest that smells like pine needles and wet dirt after it rains. My house sits at the edge of one of those woods, tucked away from any neighbors. The isolation doesn't usually bother me. Hell, I moved here because I wanted peace and quiet. No traffic, no nosy assholes peeking through my windows, just me, my cat, and nature being its usual indifferent self. But last fucking night, yeah, nature decided to show me exactly why humans aren't meant to wander too far into the dark. It all started around 11 p.m. I just finished binge-watching some dumb survival show where these idiots think they're Bear Grylls but end up eating bark and crying about their choices. I was feeling restless, too much caffeine earlier, and figured maybe a quick walk outside would help burn off some energy before bed. Plus, it's October now, so the air's crisp, the leaves crunch underfoot, and everything feels kind of magical in a Hallmark movie sort of way. You know what I mean? I grabbed my hoodie, slipped on my boots, and stepped out onto the porch. The moon was almost full, casting long shadows across the yard. Everything looked peaceful. Hell, even the wind chimes hanging from the eaves were behaving themselves instead of clanging around like banshees every time the breeze picked up. Perfect night for a stroll, right? Wrong. I wandered toward the tree line, kicking at fallen leaves and humming something stupid under my breath. That's when I noticed the smell. At first, I thought it was just the earthy scent of decaying leaves. It's fall, after all, but then it got stronger, sharper, like rotting meat mixed with rust. Gross, right? My stomach turned, but curiosity got the better of me. Stupid move, looking back. I followed the smell deeper into the woods, flashlight in hand. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating twisted roots and gnarled branches that looked like skeletal fingers reaching out to grab me. Classic horror movie stuff, except there wasn't supposed to be anything scary here. Just trees and squirrels and whatever other woodland critters call this place home. As I walked, the sound changed. At first, it was just the usual nighttime noises, crickets chirping, owls hooting, the occasional rustle of leaves as something scurried past. But then I heard it. A low, guttural growl that didn't belong to any animal I'd ever encountered. It sent a chill crawling up my spine, like someone had poured ice water down my back. I froze, heart pounding, and swung the flashlight around. Nothing. Just trees and shadows and more goddamn trees. Fuck this, I muttered to myself, turning back toward the house. Except, wait, where the hell was the house? I could have sworn I only walked 20 feet into the woods, but now everything looked wrong. The path I'd taken was gone, swallowed by darkness. Panic bubbled up in my chest, but I forced myself to breathe. Stay calm, right? It's just the woods. You'll find your way back. Except I didn't. Every step I took seemed to lead me farther away from safety. The growling grew louder, closer, until it felt like it was right behind me. I spun around again, flashlight trembling in my grip, but still nothing. Just empty space where something should have been. Or maybe it was hiding, waiting. And then I saw it. At first, I thought it was just another shadow, darker than the rest. But as I stared, it shifted, moved, took shape. Oh God, it took shape. It was tall, way taller than it should have been, and thin, impossibly thin, like someone had stretched a human body to its breaking point. Its limbs were wrong, too long, too angular, like they bend in places bones shouldn't bend. And its face, oh Jesus Christ, its face. I don't even know how to describe it without losing it right here. Imagine a skull, but not quite. Hollow eyes that glowed faintly, a mouth stretched wide enough to split its head in half, filled with jagged teeth that clicked together like broken glass. I dropped the flashlight. It hit the ground with a thud, rolling away and leaving me in near total darkness. The thing tilted its head, studying me like I was some kind of science experiment. Then it spoke. Not with words, exactly, but with sounds that vibrated in my skull, making my teeth ache and my ears ring. It hurt to listen, but I couldn't look away. Couldn't move. "Who are you?" I croaked, voice shaking so hard I barely recognized it. "Because, yeah, brilliant idea," asked the nightmare creature politely to identify itself. Real smooth, genius. It didn't answer. Instead, it reached out, one of those freakishly long arms extending toward me, fingers twitching like spiders' legs. I stumbled backward, tripping over a root and landing hard on my ass. Pain shot up my tailbone, but I barely noticed. All I could focus on was the thing looming over me, its glowing eyes boring into mine like drills. And then it did something that made my blood run cold. It smiled. Not just a creepy-ass grin, either. It smiled like it knew me. Like we'd met before. Like it had been waiting for me. That's when I ran. I don't even remember getting to my feet. Just suddenly I was sprinting through the woods, branches whipping at my face, lungs burning like fire. The thing didn't chase me, not that I could hear. Anyway, but I swear I felt its gaze following me. Watching me. Judging me. Somehow, miraculously, I found my way back to the house. When I burst through the front door, slamming it shut behind me, I collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air. My cat stared at me like I was insane, which, fair enough, I probably was. Here's the thing, though. I haven't left the house since. I've been sitting here typing this post while keeping one eye on the window, half expecting to see that thing staring back at me. And you know what the worst part is? I'm not even sure it's gone. Every little noise outside sets me on edge. Every creak of the floorboards makes me jump. Even the goddamn wind chimes sound different now, like they're mocking me. So yeah, that's my story. Make of it what you will. Maybe I hallucinated the whole thing. Maybe I'm losing my mind. Or maybe there really is something out there, watching, waiting. Either way, I'm not going back into those woods anytime soon. Not unless I want to end up like whatever poor bastard left that smell behind. Anyway, thanks for reading. If anyone else has seen something similar, let me know. Preferably while I'm still alive to respond. Alright, so, buckle up. This is going to sound insane, but holy shit, I'm still shaking as I type this out. Like, legit hands trembling over my keyboard like some cliché horror movie victim. Let me just say right now, I never thought I'd be one of those people posting on r/nosleep, but here we are. Life comes at you fast when you work in a morgue, apparently. Let me start from the beginning because context matters, and honestly, it all started pretty normal. Well, as normal as working third shift at a city morgue can get. My name's Mike, by the way. I've been an assistant embalmer for about 3 years now. It's not exactly glamorous work, but hey, somebody's got to do it, right? Plus, it pays decently enough that I don't have to live off ramen noodles anymore. Anyway, last night was supposed to be routine. A few bodies coming in, paperwork to file, maybe catch up on podcast while cleaning equipment. Easy stuff. It was around 10 p.m. when things kicked off. The evening coroner had already clocked out, leaving me alone with Dr. Patel, who always pulls these late shifts since she lives 2 blocks away. She's cool, though keeps to herself most of the time, which works fine for me. We got a call about a John Doe found floating in the river downtown. Cops brought him in wrapped in plastic, looking like something out of a CSI episode. Not much to see except bloated skin and waterlogged clothes, per bastard. Standard procedure. We logged him into the system, tagged his toe, and slid him into one of the freezers until morning. Nothing too weird yet, promise. After that, Dr. Patel headed home, leaving me alone to finish up the cleanup. By then, it was pushing midnight. You know how it gets during graveyard hours, quiet enough to hear every creak in the building, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like they're dying slow deaths. That's when the creepiness usually starts creeping in, pun intended. But nah. Nothing unusual. Just your typical dead bodies and disinfectant vibe. I popped in my earbuds, queued up Joe Rogan, and started scrubbing down the gurneys. Routine. Except, Okay, here's where things started feeling off. First, there was this smell. Not the usual antiseptic stink or even the faint metallic tang of blood. No, this was different. It smelled sour. Like spoiled milk mixed with wet earth. At first, I figured it was probably coming from the trash bins outside. They hadn't been emptied in days, but nope, it wasn't going away. In fact, it kept getting stronger, like whatever it was inside the room with me. I paused my podcast and sniffed again. Still there. Ugh. Gross. Then came the noise. Or rather, noises. See, our morgue has this old HVAC system that groans like a pissed-off banshee whenever it kicks on. Normally, I tune it out, but tonight, shit sounded louder than usual. Every vent rattled, every pipe clanged, and it felt like the walls themselves were breathing. And beneath all that mechanical chaos, I swore I heard something else. A low, rhythmic tapping, like fingernails against metal. Tap, 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 over and over. Get it together, Mike, I muttered to myself, glancing toward the wall of freezer drawers. Nothing moved. Everything looked normal. So why did I feel like I was being watched? I tried to ignore it. Really, I did. Kept scrubbing, kept listening to Joe talk about intermittent fasting or whatever. But then the temperature dropped. Like, hard. 1 second, I'm sweating under the fluorescents. The next, I'm shivering despite wearing a hoodie. The air turned icy, thick almost, like walking through fog. I looked up at the thermostat. It read 68 degrees. Same as always. What the hell? That's when the drawers started moving. Okay, hold up. Before anyone calls bullshit, let me clarify. They weren't sliding open fully or anything dramatic like that. More like vibrating. Each drawer quivered slightly, like someone or something was knocking from inside. My stomach bottomed out. This isn't possible, I thought. These people are dead. They're frozen solid. There's no way they could tap, tap, tap. The sound echoed behind me. Closer this time. Too close. I spun around, heart pounding, half expecting to see someone standing there messing with me. Nobody. Just empty space between me and the door. Except, wait, was the door closed before? Swear to God. I remember locking it after Dr. Patel left. Now it stood slightly ajar, like someone had nudged it open. Hello? I called out, voice cracking like a damn teenager. No answer. Just silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Against my better judgment, I walked over to check the door. Maybe a janitor forgot something? Or security stopped by. As I reached for the handle, I noticed something strange. The floor near the threshold gleamed oddly, reflecting the light in a way it shouldn't. I bent down for a closer look, and nearly puked. There were smears on the tile. Dark, wet streaks trailing inward from the hallway. Footprints. Bare footprints. And they weren't human-sized. Too long, too narrow. Almost claw-like. I stumbled back, pulse racing. Okay, calm down. I told myself. Could be animal tracks. Raccoons get into buildings sometimes, right? Yeah, sure. Totally plausible explanation. Except raccoons don't walk upright, and they definitely don't leave trails leading straight to the freezer drawers. Speaking of which, the tapping resumed. Louder now. Insistent. Coming from the far end of the wall. Drawer number 12, specifically. I stared at it, paralyzed. Whatever logic part of my brain remained screamed at me to leave, to grab my keys and bolt out the door. But morbid curiosity or sheer stupidity rooted me to the spot. With shaking hands, I approached the drawer. The metal surface felt colder than it should, frost forming along the edges despite the ambient warmth. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed the handle and yanked it open, and immediately wished I hadn't. Inside lay John Doe, exactly as we'd left him earlier. Pale, bloated, lifeless. Except, his eyes were wide open, staring directly at me, unblinking. Worse still, his mouth moved. Not speaking, just twitching silently, lips curling into what might have been a smile if it didn't look so fucking wrong. I slammed the drawer shut, backing away until I hit the opposite wall. My chest heaved, trying to suck in air that suddenly seemed non-existent. The room spun. Panic clawed at my throat. Then, above the roar of my own heartbeat, I heard it. A laugh. Low, guttural, dripping with malice. It came from everywhere and nowhere, reverberating off the walls like the building itself was mocking me. I didn't stick around to figure out what happened next. I booked it out the door, sprinting down the hall without looking back. Didn't stop running until I reached my car, fumbling with the keys before peeling out of the parking lot like a bat out of hell. Now, sitting here typing this, I can't shake the feeling that I'm still being watched. Every shadow seems darker, every creak louder. Part of me wants to believe it was stress, lack of sleep, or some elaborate prank gone horribly wrong. But deep down, I know better. Because when I got home, I checked my phone. Somehow, sometime during my escape, I'd taken a picture. Don't ask me how, I don't remember unlocking my screen, let alone opening the camera app. But there it was, staring back at me, a grainy photo of the morgue, shot from across the room. Everything appeared normal, except for drawer number 12. It was wide open, and standing in front of it, silhouetted by the harsh overhead light, was a figure. Tall, gaunt, impossibly thin. Its head tilted unnaturally to one side, face obscured by shadows. Long, spindly arms hung limply at its sides, fingers brushing the floor. Oh, and one more thing. If you zoom in close enough, you can see John Doe lying on the gurney behind it. Eyes still wide open, mouth still smiling. So yeah, that's my story. Make of it what you will. All I know is, I'm calling in sick tomorrow. And probably the day after that. Hell, maybe forever. Because whatever the fuck that thing was, it's still in there. Waiting. And trust me, you don't want to meet it. If you're reading this, you should probably turn on every light in your house and maybe grab a beer or something because, yeah, this isn't gonna be fun to read, but it sure as hell wasn't fun living through it. So here's the thing. I'm not some overly imaginative weirdo who thinks every shadow is out to get me. I work construction during the day and spend most nights either passed out in front of the TV or messing around with my dog. Mac's pretty normal dude, right? But last weekend, I decided to go camping by myself. Just me, the woods, and no cell service for miles. Sounds peaceful, doesn't it? Yeah, well, that's what I thought too. It started off fine. Like, actually kind of great. I drove out to this spot I found a few years back when I was hiking with friends. It's tucked away deep enough that you don't run into other campers, but close enough to civilization that if something goes wrong, you can hightail it out of there. The air smelled like pine needles and damp earth, which always reminds me of being a kid running around outside without a care in the world. You know those moments where life just feels simple? That's how Friday afternoon felt. I set up my tent near a little clearing surrounded by trees. There was even a stream nearby, babbling softly like white noise. Perfect place to relax, crack open a cold one, and forget about everything for a couple days. And that's exactly what I did. Well, until Saturday morning rolled around. Saturday started normally enough. Woke up early because birds apparently think 5 a.m. is an appropriate time to start their concert. Made coffee over the fire, ate some granola bars, and took Max for a walk deeper into the woods. He loves sniffing every tree he passes, tail wagging like crazy. Honestly, watching him made me feel better about coming out here alone. Dogs have a way of making everything seem safer, you know? Anyway, we wandered farther than usual that day. Not intentionally, just sort of lost track of time while following this narrow trail that wound between these massive old trees. The forest got quieter the farther we went, which struck me as odd since I'd been hearing birds and squirrels nonstop all morning. Even Max seemed a little uneasy, his ears perked up and his nose twitching like he smelled something strange. And then I saw it. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light or maybe a shadow cast by the trees overhead. But no, it was real. A hole, about 10 feet wide, perfectly circular, dug straight down into the ground. It looked unnatural, too smooth, like someone, or something, had deliberately carved it out. The dirt around the edges was loose and fresh, like it had been dug recently. Now, I've done enough projects at work to know how holes are supposed to look. This wasn't made by any machine I'd ever seen. Hell, it didn't even look like it was dug by hand. More like, I dunno, claw marks? Whatever it was, it gave me the creeps. Max stood frozen beside me, staring at the hole with his hackles raised. He let out this low growl, barely audible, but it sent chills down my spine. "Come on, buddy," I said, trying to sound calm. "Let's head back." But Max wouldn't budge. Instead, he stepped closer to the edge of the hole, still growling. That's when I heard it, the sound. Faint at first, almost like breathing. Slow, rhythmic inhales and exhales coming from inside the hole. My stomach twisted, and I swear my heart skipped a beat. I grabbed Max's collar and dragged him away, practically jogging back toward the campsite. By the time we got back, it was late afternoon. I tried to shake off the unease, telling myself it was probably just some animal burrow or maybe runoff from rainwater. Nothing to freak out about. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I closed my eyes, I could picture that damn hole, dark and endless, waiting for something or someone to fall in. Night fell quickly after dinner. I built up the fire nice and big, figuring flames would keep whatever creepy vibes I was feeling at bay. Max curled up next to me, finally seeming relaxed again. For a while, things were okay. Peaceful even. The stars were bright, the fire crackled, and the forest was quiet except for the occasional rustle of leaves. Then the noises started. At first, it was subtle, a faint scratching sound coming from somewhere nearby. Could have been branches rubbing together or critters moving around in the underbrush. No big deal, right? Except it kept getting louder, closer. Eventually, it sounded like something, or multiple somethings, was circling the campsite. I grabbed a flashlight and shone it into the darkness, but all I saw were trees swaying gently in the breeze. Nothing out of the ordinary. Still, the scratching continued, accompanied now by a soft, wet squelching noise that made my skin crawl. Like bare feet stepping in mud. Or maybe something worse. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to sound braver than I felt. My voice echoed into the void, unanswered. Max woke up and started pacing nervously, his tail tucked between his legs. That's when I noticed the smell. It hit me like a punch to the face, rotten meat mixed with damp soil, sharp and nauseating. I gagged, covering my nose with my shirt, but it didn't help. The stench grew stronger, filling the air around me until it felt like it was pressing against my chest, suffocating me. And then I saw them. Shapes moving in the shadows just beyond the firelight. Tall, spindly figures with long limbs that bent at unnatural angles. They shuffled awkwardly, jerking forward in fits and starts like marionettes controlled by an amateur puppeteer. Their faces, if you could call them that, were featureless, smooth and pale like porcelain masks. But their eyes, God, their eyes, black pits that reflected the firelight like oil slicks, empty yet somehow aware. I froze, unable to move or breathe. Max barked wildly, snapping me out of my trance. I grabbed a burning log from the fire and waved it at the creatures, shouting for them to stay back. To my surprise, they hesitated, retreating slightly into the darkness. Encouraged, I threw the log at them, hitting one square in the chest. It let out a high-pitched screech that pierced my eardrums, and the group scattered, disappearing into the trees. For a moment, everything was silent again. Too silent. Even the crickets had stopped chirping. I packed up my stuff as fast as I could, throwing everything into my car with shaking hands. Max jumped into the passenger seat, panting heavily, his tail still tucked tight against his body. I didn't care about leaving anything behind. I just wanted to get the hell out of there. The drive home was a blur. I don't remember much of it except the overwhelming need to put as much distance between me and that godforsaken forest as possible. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I collapsed onto the couch, exhausted and wired at the same time. Max refused to leave my side, whimpering softly whenever I moved. That's when I realized something was wrong. There was dirt on my boots. Fresh dirt, caked thickly around the soles and laces. But here's the thing. I hadn't walked anywhere near mud or loose soil since leaving the campsite. And the smell, it was faint, but it was there. That same rancid stench clinging to my clothes, my skin, my hair. I stripped everything off and took a shower, scrubbing until my skin turned raw. But the smell didn't go away. Neither did the dirt. No matter how hard I washed, it stayed stuck to me like glue. And now, sitting here typing this, I can hear it again. That slow, rhythmic breathing, coming from somewhere beneath the floorboards. What the fuck do I do? I've always had an odd connection to the paranormal. As a teenager, I couldn't stop writing disturbingly dark poetry. I was a loner, the kind of person with no close friends, just fleeting acquaintances. But that's not the main story. My parents divorced when I was young, and afterward, I fell into a deep depression, spending most of my time alone. We moved in with my grandparents, who gave us a small house right next to theirs, so close that it took less than 5 steps to reach their door. My mother often stayed with them, but I preferred solitude in our new place. One night, as I slept in the dark, I dreamed of a man with a pitch-black face sitting at the edge of my bed, staring at me. I woke up in terror, my skin crawling with the certainty that someone or something was there. I bolted upright, flicked on the lights, and sprinted to my grandparents' house. Sitting beside my grandmother, I muttered, "That house is so creepy." She replied casually, "Of course. 2 men died there from gas poisoning while renting it. We found them a week later." Her bluntness hit me like a slap. But that was just the beginning. As I got older, my mother remarried, and my grandfather moved to another house about 150 meters away. I was left alone in the old one, a big, creaking, unsettling place, for a year and a half. Though my grandparents weren't far, I still saw things. Shadow people. I avoided most of the house, confining myself to the living room, kitchen, and bathroom. The rest of it felt watched. I was a student finishing my graduation project, so I rarely left except for groceries. The house had 2 long hallways, one leading to the bathroom, the other to my grandparents' old room, which was always locked and packed with their belongings. Standing in that hallway, you couldn't see the door at the end, just an abyss of darkness. I never went near it. Late at night, between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m., I'd hear banging on the door. I'd pretend to brush it off, playing brave because I had no choice, nowhere else to go. Every night, I locked the living room door, though the latch was weak, and propped a chair against it for extra security before turning on the TV and trying to sleep. One night, I woke up feverish, almost hallucinating, when I heard the chair move. Then I saw it, a small, shadowy figure peeking at me. I froze. The chair had shifted, leaving the door slightly ajar. I screamed, turned on the lights, and called my parents. No answer. It was 3 a.m., after all. I prayed, trying to convince myself it was just my fever. 2 months later, I was watching a YouTube video about jinn, entities in Islamic belief, similar to demons. The video, 30 Facts You Didn't Know About Jinn, ended with, "Jinn live among us. One might be watching you right now." I laughed nervously and said, "I'm not scared." I regretted it that same night. I played Quran recitations before bed, believed to ward off jinn. But at 2 a.m., I woke to 3 shadow figures dancing around me, one at my feet, one by my head, the third right over my face. They made a strange, staticky noise. I screamed at them to leave, and they vanished. After that, insomnia took over. I stayed awake until dawn, studying, cooking, gaming, anything to avoid sleep. When I did sleep, the dreams were too real. One night, I heard whispers, not soft, but violent, like a hellish chorus. I followed the sound to the locked room at the end of the hallway. A bald, muscular man emerged from the darkness, veins bulging, staring into my soul. I recited prayers as my cousin's voice screamed from the stairs, "Run." I fought against an invisible force pulling me back, but made it out gasping. Then I woke up to the whispers again. Later, my grandmother stayed over. She always slept with the light on, but one night, I woke to see a gigantic little girl grinning at me, holding a gray-skinned dwarf-like creature in her arms. Both stared, one at me, one at my grandma. I shut my eyes and pretended to sleep. Another time, something spoke to me in my sleep. You should let us in. You're done for anyway. Nobody wants you. Your parents left. We're the only ones who'll help now. I woke up crying, a mess. I in another dream. I stood in a grand castle bedroom where a witch-like woman demanded I let her in. I mocked her until she left, replaced by a deaf-mute figure. Later, my grandma accused me of running around her bed, throwing things, yanking off her covers, things I never did. One night, she woke up screaming. Half her belongings were scorched beside unlit candles. No fire source. Eventually, I graduated, moved abroad for work, and thought I'd left it all behind. Until one morning at 5 a.m., I woke up to a white fog covering my face. It lingered, then turned black and vanished out. I still don't know what it was. In 1996, when my mother was 6 months pregnant with me, she decided to play with a Ouija board alongside her sister. My grandmother had passed away 3 months earlier, and they hoped to contact her. At first, they believed they were speaking to their mother, the same woman who had died tragically in that very house. The conversation lasted about 30 minutes until the planchette suddenly jerked, and the air turned ice cold. It began racing across the board, repeating a single word over and over. Mine, mine, mine. Terrified, my mother ended the session. A few weeks later, she went into labor far too early. I was born a month and a half premature, so small that I had to remain in the hospital for 2 extra weeks. But eventually, we went home, and everything seemed normal. Then, when I was 4, the nightmares started. In them, I'd be sitting at the top of the stairs in our house. Though it should have been daytime, everything was unnaturally dark. My feet would sink into the floor like quicksand, trapping me as I screamed for what felt like hours. And at the end of every dream, it would appear, crawling toward me, slow and deliberate. A gaunt, black creature with elongated limbs and fingers tipped with even longer, darker nails. Its eyes burned red. The dreams came almost nightly. Eventually, I learned to wake myself up the moment the creature appeared. When I told my mother, she brushed it off, saying I was scaring myself by staying up too late. But her attitude changed when my little sister, just 2.5 years old at the time, started saying eerie things. One night, as my mother tucked us in, she played their usual bedtime game. She'd ask my sister to spell a word, and if she got it right, she'd earn a small reward. But instead of a normal word, my sister suddenly sang in a chilling, sing-song voice, "Mummy, can you spell black man better run?" That same night, I woke to see an old woman standing at the foot of my bed. At first, I thought she was real until I screamed, turned on the light, and she vanished. Shaken, I kept the light on, too afraid to sleep in the dark. But the moment I closed my eyes, I was back in the darkness. This time, I knew she wasn't human. Her skin was blue, her teeth rotten, her eyes an unnatural, glowing hue. She stared at me, grinning, before bursting into laughter, first a giggle, then a mad, cackling howl. She threw her head back like a mental patient, laughing so hard her jaw unhinged like a snake's. Then, mid-laugh, she snapped her head forward and growled in a deep, male voice, "If you're scared, cover your head, little piggy. Because I'm not gonna stop." I yanked the blankets over my face instantly. Her laughter continued, echoing around me until, finally, daylight came. After that, my mother called my grandfather, a pastor, to bless the house. Things settled down, mostly. Years later, as a teenager, I moved into a downstairs bedroom while my sister stayed upstairs. Without fail, I'd wake every night at 4:30 a.m. to the sound of creaking footsteps climbing down the stairs, stopping at my door. It would slowly open, then close again. No one was ever there. By the time I was 17, we moved out. I hadn't experienced anything supernatural in years until one stormy June night. The power went out during a violent thunderstorm, so my mother, sister, and I fell asleep together in our bed. We woke simultaneously to an unnatural chill out for summer, especially with the AC off. Then we saw it. A 7-foot tall figure loomed in the doorway, and I heard that laugh again, the same one from my childhood. A whisper followed, seared into my memory forever. I found you. The black man, then he vanished. Nothing else happened for years, until I moved to Florida with my now husband. He worked night shifts, leaving me alone, restless. One night at 1 a.m., I stepped outside to smoke. As I finished, I noticed something on the roof, a long, black arm with clawed fingers dangling over the edge, as if waiting to snatch my hair. When I told my husband, he brushed it off until he saw it too. That was days ago. Now I'm just waiting, wondering when it'll finally come inside. Growing up in a military family meant I moved constantly, never keeping friends for long. Pair that with crippling social anxiety, and you've got a recipe for isolation. By age 14, after 3 years in rural Newfoundland, I was friendless, depressed, and stuck in a rough home life. Our property spanned about an acre, separated from miles of dense forest by a river. Those woods were eerie, full of ATV trails, abandoned places, and stories that had put horror movies to shame. The bear trap forest, the 40-foot swamp, the random empty suburb, but those are tales for another time. Late that August, my parents mentioned hearing voices and seeing flashlights near our backyard for weeks. They assumed it was local kids trying to steal beer from our garage. I'd heard it too, hollering from across the river in the evenings. Normally, I'd ignore it. But one afternoon around 4 p.m., curiosity got the better of me. I followed the sound about 300 feet down an ATV trail and met one of them. Let's call him Cole. He was a year or two younger, a foot shorter, and dressed in painfully outdated clothes. Think early 80s neon and shoulder pads. He seemed shocked to see me, but quickly perked up, insisting I follow him to his friend's project. We reached a clearing I'd never seen before, despite exploring those woods for years. 2 other boys were there, Mason, around my age, and Riley, a couple years older. They introduced themselves as friends, not brothers, and showed off their half-built tree fort. When they asked if I wanted to help, I jumped at the chance. I should have noticed the oddities sooner. Their clothes weren't just old, they were pristine, like they'd never been worn. No stains, no wrinkles, no signs of puberty's chaos. Their hair was perfectly combed, their skin flawless. I chalked it up to hand-me-downs and didn't press it. Over the next 2 weeks, we built a damn good fort, 8-foot birch walls, a lookout post in the tallest tree, even a table. It was the size of a 1-bedroom apartment, and we were proud. But questions nagged at me. One day, I asked Mason why I'd never seen him at school. He insisted he went there, yet we didn't share a single teacher or classmate. Then came the weirdness point. One afternoon, I offered to run home and grab food. Their reaction was instant hostility, not about the offer, but about crossing the river. Riley muttered something about it being bad luck. Later, they apologized, blaming superstition, and we moved on. A week later, I arrived to find them changed. Cole looked like he'd been beaten and left in the rain, pale, clammy, his clothes suddenly ragged. Mason and Riley weren't much better, their hair greasy, skin waxy. They brushed it off as the flu, but when they left, their coughing sounded like lifelong smokers. The next day, the fort was destroyed, not just broken, rotted. The table was splintered mush, the walls collapsed into decay, moss creeping over what had been solid with the day before. Like decades had passed overnight. I waited for them for a week. They never came. My parents shrugged it off, saying they'd probably just ditched me. But years later, at 29, I told my wife about them, their outdated clothes, their refusal to cross the river, the way they vanished. Her face went pale. You hung out with ghost kids. I laughed until she pointed out the obvious. No one else ever saw them. Not at school, not in town. Just me. So, what do you think? Were they just odd, lonely kids? Or something far stranger? I've had my share of unexplained experiences over my 36 years, especially as a kid. There were recurring incidents that left me too terrified to stay in my room. So much so that my mom bought me one of those red bed tents popular with 80s kids. Later, I even ran into odd occurrences during my Navy service. But as I grew older, I brushed most of it aside, chalking things up to gaps in my own understanding. Then, 3 years ago, the VA accidentally declared me dead. That mistake kicked off a downward spiral until my childhood friend, Darius, a brother to me since we were 6, moved in. His life was falling apart too. One night, fueled by desperation, we binge-watched YouTube videos on demonic pacts, trading souls for a better future. At the time, 2 girls, Lena and Mira, relatives of an ex, were staying in my basement. It was a separate unit, accessible only from outside, so they had their own space rent-free in exchange for helping with my sons and chores. That night, they jokingly suggested Darius and I look into supernatural bargaining. The videos were useless, so we started simple, the Charlie game. You balance a pencil on paper divided into yes/no quadrants, ask questions, and wait for movement. To our shock, it worked. Darius even posted a video of the pencil spinning on its own. Emboldened and very high, we drafted a 30-for-30 deal, 30 years of servitude after death in exchange for 30 years of wealth and influence. No fame, just enough to secure my son's futures. I pricked my thumb on my cat's claw, smeared blood on the paper, and made the offer. Nothing happened, no flickering lights, no cold breeze. Just a shared unease, like being watched. We fell asleep in the living room. The next morning, I found a handprint on the coffee table. Too small to be mine or Darius's, with 4 digits, 3 thumb-like appendages and 1 finger, claw marks included. The girls swore they'd heard us partying all night. We hadn't. My sons heard nothing. The prints reappeared the next 2 mornings. Then the girls reported lights flickering, scratching at their basement door, and the shower curtain yanking open. My sons woke with cat-like scratches on their chests. Odd, since our cats never scratched them. One night, we all heard scratching at the upstairs door. Armed, Darius and I investigated. We followed rustling noises to the basement, only to see a shadow moving behind fogged windows. The door was wide open. When I pulled aside the blanket serving as a door, the lights cut off with an audible snap. Darius bolted, thinking I had sprinted past him in the dark. I hadn't. The girls moved out after that, though they still visit. They're convinced I unleashed something angry my deal didn't satisfy. Oddly, though, things did improve. The VA fixed my status, my writing career took off, and Darius sold his house for a life-changing sum. But the disturbances continue, footprints and snow, attic stairs left open, fresh scratches on my skin. The girls insist the entity's resentful. I joke that Charlie needs to pay up properly. A 30-for-30 trade is fair. Until then, it's just a pest. When I was growing up in the 60s on Long Island, I adored my Aunt Clara. She was my dad's baby sister, 12 years younger than him and 17 years older than me. She worked as a flight attendant for a major airline and lived in an apartment in the city. She had classic Italian beauty, petite with olive skin, green eyes, and jet black hair. She doted on me, and I loved the pictures and gifts she'd bring back from her travels around the country and sometimes even Europe. As I got older, my parents let me visit her apartment, where she and her equally gorgeous, glamorous friends would smoke cigarettes, drink cocktails, play records, and talk about grown-up, sophisticated things. Just being there made me feel cool and worldly. One day, when Clara was 30, she called in sick to work, thinking she had the flu. It turned out to be meningitis, and within 2 days, she was gone. What followed were some of the saddest moments of my childhood. One of only 3 times I ever saw my father cry, big, racking sobs, was as he dressed for her wake. At the wake itself, Aunt Clara lay in her casket wearing her flight attendant uniform, still beautiful. I remember how soft and lovely the cream-colored satin lining of her casket felt under my fingers. So many people came to her funeral that they spilled out onto the sidewalk next to the suburban Catholic church. Family Sunday dinners with my grandparents, aunts, and uncles never felt the same after that. Ironically, this niece of a flight attendant from the golden age of air travel has always been terrified of flying. For years, I traveled frequently for work and on long-haul flights, I often couldn't cope without downing an entire bottle of red wine and taking Ambien. A few months ago, I decided enough was enough. It wasn't exactly healthy behavior. So, on my first cross-country flight in a while, I took 10 milligrams of melatonin, sat in my seat anxiously, and tried to fall asleep. Eventually, I did, but what followed were terrifying dreams. Of course, it would take place on the same flight. And of course, the cabin pressure would drop, and the plane would plummet toward a cornfield as everyone panicked and screamed. Then, I saw a flight attendant walking down the aisle toward my seat. It was Aunt Clara. She walked calmly and intently, with a little sly smile on her face, as if I were an old friend she hadn't seen in years. She was wearing the same flight attendant uniform she'd been buried in, but her legs and feet were bare. She stopped at my seat, looked at me, took my left hand in hers, and said, "It'll be okay, honey. It really will. Things can look bad, and sometimes it gets a little turbulent, but the pilot will right it." Then she asked, "How are you?" I stammered out the first thing that came to mind, as if answering a question about what I'd done with my life since I was 13. I think I mentioned where I went to school and something about my first job. I talked about cell phones and how much she would have loved them. I told her my dad had passed, but that my mom and sister were doing fine. I rambled on about how ridiculous rents were in the city and about all the changes that had happened to our hometown. As I babbled, I noticed the plane returning to normal, the pressure stabilizing, the passengers calming down. The dream ended shortly before everything returned to normalcy, with Aunt Clara's hand still resting gently on my shoulder. I woke up 30 minutes before landing, stunned by the vividness of the dream. I hadn't thought about Aunt Clara or reflected on her in such detail for years. With a few minutes to spare, I called my mother and told her what happened. I mentioned how strange it seemed that in the dream, Clara was barefoot while working on the plane. My mother paused and then said, "Clara was buried barefoot. Apparently, it's a custom in the little corner of Sicily your father's family comes from for women to be buried barefoot. They did it for Clara and later for Grandma. I wouldn't have known because the lower lid of her casket was closed during the wake. I'm not religious, but hearing that made me truly believe that Aunt Clara, or some piece of her, had come to visit and comfort me during a stressful time. It felt like a warm blanket wrapped around me. Suddenly, memories of her flooded back, details I didn't even realize I remembered. I found myself crying in an airport bathroom afterward. I've been through a lot in my life. Moves, unemployment, divorce, losing a house and getting one back, friends and family dying. But for a few moments in that dream, I got to see someone who loved me deeply when I was a little girl excited about the big world ahead of her. I love you, Aunt Clara. Visit again anytime. About 10 years ago, my family and I brought back these small vases that we were told were 400 years old from Machu Picchu. The vases were made of mud and had faces carved into them. We got them as a gift from a family friend who claimed he wanted to give us something special to commemorate our trip to Peru. He said he bought them from a local in the Pisco region, where Machu Picchu is located. We brought the vases back home to Canada, and pretty much from the first week, an awful streak of bad luck and accidents began to plague our family. My mom developed cataracts at a very young age, my dad lost both of his jobs, my brother and I were constantly sick, and my little sister would randomly start screaming for no reason. Things got so bad that we were on the verge of losing our home. Desperate for money, we started looking for things to sell around the house and came across the vases. We weren't sure if they were worth anything or how much we could get for them. To get an idea of their value, we called one of my dad's friends in Peru who had worked in a museum. After going back and forth with him for a bit, he told my dad that items like these aren't meant to leave their homeland and are probably only worth a few bucks. Then he dropped a bombshell. He said the vases were likely cursed. To lift the curse, he explained, we needed to prick our fingers, smear a little blood on each vase, and send them back to Peru. Of course, we were extremely skeptical. A blood sacrifice? That sounded ridiculous. We figured the guy just wanted the vases so he could sell them himself. Fast forward 2 days, and my parents got into a pretty nasty car accident. Thankfully, everyone was okay, but they both had to take time off work to recover. After that incident, they decided maybe we should listen to the advice and send the vases back, blood ritual and all. So we did exactly that. We pricked our fingers, smeared a bit of blood on each vase, and shipped them back to Peru. The next week, things started improving almost immediately. My dad landed a great new job, and so did my mom. We found a fantastic place to live with surprisingly low rent, and all of us began feeling healthier than we had in years. What do you guys think? Coincidence or cursed artifacts? Currently, my boys are 8 and 6. At the time of this story, we had been living in a new place for about 5 to 6 months. My oldest, who isn't exactly the sharpest tool in the shed, to be honest, kept walking to the corner of the room, looking up and talking. He was still doing a lot of babbling at that age, something he didn't fully grow out of until he was almost 6. After a few times of him doing this, he walked over, grabbed his younger brother by the hand, led him to the same corner, and they both looked up, started talking, and were smiling and giggling as if an adult was interacting with them. After my youngest tripped over his own feet while standing there, I asked, "What in the world are you two doing?" thinking it was some kind of game. My oldest giggled and said, "I'm talking to Grandpa." Confused, I replied, "Maybe your grandpa lives in Nebraska. He's very far away." My child looked at me seriously and said, "No, Mommy, it's your grandpa." As I mentioned, my oldest was still babbling quite a bit back then, so for him to suddenly speak so clearly and coherently was unsettling. I looked at the corner where both my boys were now chatting and holding up toys as though showing them to someone. I watched for a few minutes. All of this unfolded over a total of about half an hour. Then, trying to get dinner started, I called out, "Babies, come watch your movie so Mom can finish cooking." Because little ones have zero logic, the younger one waddled over and plopped down on the couch. The eldest picked up the toys that had accumulated in the corner, put them away, and sat next to his brother. I went back to making dinner, but kept glancing at the corner. Out of nowhere, I heard myself say, "Thanks, Grandpa." Just then, the door in the corner swung open as if someone had walked through it. There was a heightened feeling in the room afterward, like the air had changed. That night, I had a dream about my childhood home. In the dream, I walked along the path leading into the woods behind our house. There was a small structure there, granite-like, resembling a mausoleum, but it was little more than an awning supported by 4 pillars with one wall holding a door and a bench swing inside. I walked up to it, lit some incense, and sat on the swing, slowly rocking back and forth while staring at the ground. Then I saw them, those old, ratty sneakers my grandpa always wore. And there he was, sitting next to me with that familiar smile of his. I just started talking, mostly about the boys. I told him how much I missed him and that I had named my oldest after him. He just sat there, listening, with that same warm smile on his face. After a while, we both stood up. I hugged him tightly and whispered, "I haven't told you everything yet." Suddenly, my name was called from somewhere far off. I looked around but didn't see anyone. When I turned back, he was gone. I yanked the door open, and it revealed a vertical shaft that seemed endless in both directions, completely lined with doors. I woke up crying, gripped by a panic attack. My grandfather passed away in 2005, my grandmother in 2008, and my son was born in 2010, just 1 week shy of my grandfather's birthday, which happened to be the day the doctor had originally scheduled me to be induced. When my younger sister, Claire, was quite young, our grandmother bought her a porcelain doll. The doll wasn't anything special, it wasn't an antique or anything like that. It was just the kind of doll you'd buy at a novelty shop. It was fragile and couldn't be moved without possibly breaking it. She had this doll for a few years before my parents divorced. After the divorce, We moved in with their mother to a poor neighborhood in Alton, Illinois. The house felt strange. It also had a strange smell. My sister placed the doll in one of the built-in cabinets in the wall, and that's where it stayed for the first few days. At first, we started noticing small changes about where it was or how it was positioned. It would be on the shelf facing the living room most of the time, but when you left the room and came back, it would be rotated a different way. Okay, we thought, Mom's probably messing with us. We largely ignored it, but it kept happening. After a few more months, the doll started ending up in different places around the house. It would be on the cabinet, and when you came back from another room, it would be on the dining room table. Or it would be on one side of the table in the living room by the couch, or even on the floor, facing the television. We had made a lot of new friends in the neighborhood, and when they came over, I would show them what the doll would do. Without fail, I would put it somewhere. We would leave the room for a few minutes, come back, and it would now be in a different spot. I'll go back to saying that we thought my mom was messing with us at first, but Mom worked a lot of those days, and we skipped school plenty of times to stay home, so it couldn't have been her doing it. One day, we decided to mess with the Ouija board I had in my closet. I don't remember if we bought it or if it was just there already. The messages coming back from the questions we asked identified a spirit named Candy Zimmerman. She didn't say much, but I was eventually able to connect with her myself through the board. She said she had a crush on me. One day, I skipped school again, but my sister went. I always walked with my buddy down to the bus stop and hung out with him before heading back home, and I watched my sister get on the bus. My mom worked early, so she wasn't there that day. Then I went back to the house, locked up, and since I was still tired, I opted to go back to bed. The next thing that happened, I will never forget. I heard a knock at my bedroom door. It startled me awake, but I ignored it and laid my head back down. After a few minutes, there was another knock, this one much louder and in a rhythm. I still remember it to this day. Think shave and a haircut rhythm, but slightly off. This time, I was freaked out and lay there with my eyes open for, I don't know how long. The door to my bedroom was heavy, and it always stuck in warmer weather, which it was. The next thing that happened was the door popped open just enough for me to see out into the hallway, but not enough for me to see over the edge of my bed. I sat up in bed and looked down onto the floor, and there, standing at the entrance to my room, was that doll on its stand, staring at me. Before the fear set in, I was actually pissed off. Did my sister come back? Was she messing with me? I got up, grabbed the doll by the hair, and carried her out into the living room. No one was there. I checked the front door, it was locked. I barged into my sister's room, no one was there. I barged into my mom's room, no one was home. At this point, I was freaking out. I took the doll to my sister's room and threw her in the closet. I buried her under a stack of bags full of old clothes and boxes of junk and shut the door. I spent the rest of the day sitting on the front porch, waiting for Mom to come home. It never happened again, and I made sure to have a friend, a local Wiccan, bind the Ouija board, which she kept. We moved out of the house a year later, after a few more paranormal incidents. As for the doll, after we moved back in with my father, she stayed in my bedroom closet for about 5 years. One day, we cleaned it out and threw her away. Was the doll haunted? I don't know. It could have just been that house and whatever it was moving things around.